That's under investigation right now. We'll make a determination. And until such time as we find out what South Africa is doing, they're taking away land, they're confiscating land, and actually they're doing things that are perhaps far worse than that.
This State of the Nation address was not supposed to be about Donald Trump. We were supposed to talk about the government of national unity. A year ago when we sat in these chairs, it was a few months before the 2024 national and provincial elections. The ANC still thought they could be the majority party after the election, but that was not to be. We were supposed to reflect on the past 7 months of a GNU government and what President Cyril Ramaphosa will say about that tonight. But no, some terrible things has happened to the Republic in the past few days. And we are going to start with that tonight. My name is Adrian Basson. Welcome to our pre-Sona analysis, coming live to you from the News24 office in Cape Town, where I am joined by Andisiwe Makinana, News24's assistant editor for politics, and Carol Payton, our writer-at-large at News24 Business. Good evening, Carol, and good evening, Andisiwe. It's been an unprecedented 4 days. I must say I didn't expect this to be the big story going into Sona. I thought it was going to be the NHI, Carol, which you've written about so much, or the relationship between the DA and the ANC going into this. But no, it is Donald Trump and his extraordinary attacks on South Africa over the past few days. We heard him on Monday saying that land is being confiscated in South Africa, lying about that. And then this morning we heard, and then Trump saying that he will cut off all funding to South Africa, only to be followed by Marco Rubio, the foreign affairs minister, who said that he will not be traveling to the G20 to support South Africa for a number of reasons, including extreme opinions on the environment, confiscation of farms, etc. Are we under attack as we sit here from America? How should we view this? This all feels very weird, Carol.
Well, we're certainly under scrutiny. We're under very close scrutiny, and much more scrutiny than we actually were aware of. And so there's a lot of focus in Washington at the moment on South Africa, which has come as a bit of a surprise, I must say. But clearly, it's something. There is a sense in Washington amongst the new political elite that South Africa's on the wrong track, that it's doing things. It's got the wrong friends, and that can't go unpunished. That's the one issue, and then the other is on domestic policy. They are commenting very negatively on domestic policy, Expropriation Act, which we know does allow for nil compensation, but certainly does allow for mechanisms to provide fair compensation. So that's been distorted, and then also other race-based policies which are being criticised. And this is the context where in the US, the kind of the whole focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, all of those policies being rolled back like very, very swiftly, and the whole corporate world just pulling back from that, and there being a sense in Washington that, well, we're doing this and so should you. It's been a very startling few days and disturbing.
It is very strange to see us in the headlines of international publications talking about, the President of America's latest tweet or social truth message. And what has been the reaction from the South African political establishment, and specifically the ANC, to these past 4 days? You and your team have been out there speaking to the likes of Vincent Magwenya, the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola, his team. What are they shell-shocked? Are they defiant? Are they in fighting mood? What are they telling us?
The world is stunned, not just us in South Africa. And in the main, I think it is the approach that the Americans are taking. We knew of the tensions. I mean, there's been issues even with the Lady R and other issues over the years. And we knew that America hasn't been happy with South Africa going to the ICJ, for instance, taking Israel against the Gaza situation. But I think it's just the approach. You didn't expect the President of America to say the things that Trump said, and it was done in a way that is so it's never seen before. And then this barrage of attack continues on social media. So I think that's the first thing that South Africans are not used to, because normally there is a diplomatic way of addressing these things. So I think our government was, maybe they were surprised, but I think the handling has not been as bad as with the events of last week around Rwanda, for instance, and the DRC. I think there is some strategy to try to put out the facts, to try to deal with the disinformation. I don't know if there is a right or wrong way to deal with this, but so far I think there's been swift responses from the Minister of International Relations to say, these are the issues, this is our policy, we will engage the Americans, we would like to talk to them to just inform them more about what we are trying to do.
Carol, there's been a lot of speculation about why this spotlight is on South Africa. There's our colleague Peter de Tooy wrote a very good piece, I thought, about the role that the likes of the Solidarity Movement in AfriForum has played since the first Trump term, to go to Washington, D.C., speak to these conservative think tanks, speak to the likes of Tucker Carlson, who was in at Fox still, etc. What's your view? Why do you think South Africa is suddenly so much in Trump's spotlight?
Well, I mean, there is that ideological affinity, so certainly that's an issue. And as Andisi was saying, they've been annoyed for us for a long time, you know. But I think we don't know really what's driving it. And there's been some speculation to say, well, maybe it's, you know, our minerals. Maybe they're trying to ensure that, you know, change our foreign policy so that we trade those minerals with them and not with China. I think there certainly is, you know, I think the main thing in America and in the world in foreign affairs is the US-China relationship, and that's what's going to shape a lot of the stuff. So even them talking about, you know, AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, and removing that. I mean, one of the motivations is that, well, you know, China's getting in through the back door. So we're giving giving Africa these benefits, but there's China lurking in the background, actually, you know, investing and producing things. So I think a lot of it is shaped by that. Whether it's the critical minerals or not, whether it's just that they want us in their sphere of influence. I mean, you do get a sense from Trump and the way he behaves that there is no nuance. You know, it is you're for us, you're against us, and there is no middle ground. So I think, you know, South Africa has tried to play this game and say we're non-aligned, which means we can still be friends with China and even speak to Iran. And that's not going to fly anymore with them.
And I want to go into that a bit later, asking the question to both of you whether we have maybe bitten off too much to chew on the foreign policy side. And then there's Mr. Elon Musk, who we haven't spoken about, the Bryanston teenager who rose to become the richest man in the world, who is very close to Trump. There was a report this week, I'm not sure if you confirmed that, but that President Ramaphosa actually had to go through Elon Musk's father, who still lives here on the west coast of South Africa, to speak to Musk this week in relation to his own Twitter messages about this so-called land grabs that's happening in South Africa. I mean, do you think he's also in part of the mix in maybe driving this narrative?
Yeah, he seems to be very much central in what has been happening this week. He has retweeted and affirmed every statement that has been made by the Americans. And I mean, he reminds me so much of the Guptas in the South African situation, where you have this unelected person who is extremely rich, controlling just about everything about this new administration that has just come into office in America. He is a South African, and there are issues around his businesses and South Africa. So it's really hard to dismiss his role, and at the rate he's been going, it's really hard to say Musk doesn't have anything to do with what has been happening. I think it's very much part of what is going on.
In fact, there was a piece in the New York Times yesterday that the headline was something like, "What is state capture?"
That's right.
With reference to the Guptas, and the writer was then exploring the fact that it's so coincidental that Elon Musk, a born South African, is maybe doing the same thing. And you see, I do want to move to tonight's proceedings. proceedings. In about 50 minutes from now, President Ramaphosa will deliver the first State of the Nation address as a president of a government of national unity. Do you expect him to spend some time tonight during his address on this issue, on essentially a foreign policy or a foreign negotiations and diplomatic issue? We heard, I think it was his spokesperson earlier today, referring to he's not going to talk about current affairs tonight. It's about the state of the nation, which seems to indicate that it will not take center stage. What are your suspicions or predictions?
Yes, his spokesperson told us that the president will not be derailed by what has been happening this week, and the focus will be mainly on delivering the state of the nation without addressing the current affairs issues. But I think he should address, just even if he doesn't spend a lot of time on the Trump issue. But South Africans would like to hear what their president is saying, because it's not a mere remark, once-off thing by Trump. You can see there is a barrage of messages that are being put through. I mean, as we say, this morning it was a Secretary of State of America saying there are issues not just with confiscating land, there are issues around us hosting the G20, us pushing for solidarity. I don't know how is that a bad thing. So I would expect our president, even if he doesn't spend that much time on the issue, but to just say, this is our policies. This is, we went through a process in South Africa. We've got, these things are guided by the Constitution. There was public participation. And even if the laws are not maybe sent back to Parliament for amending, but there will be a process for regulations, which is also open to the public to make commentary. So I would like to hear him say something, even if he doesn't spend that much time of his speech on the issue of Donald Trump.
Well, someone else who did not take that very diplomatic approach is Gwede Mantashe, the Minister of Mineral Resources, who earlier this week at the mining indaba in Cape Town had a message for President Trump, and this is what he said.
You know, I was listening to, I have ministers in my cabinet who always worry about geopolitics with this standing threat that, because you passed an exploration act, therefore Trump will withhold funding to South Africa. And I said, let's not immobilize Africa, let's withhold minerals to US. That is it. If they don't give us money, let's not give them minerals. But the reality, they take our minerals, but say we're withdrawing funding. No, we have minerals in the continent, and therefore we have something that we have. We're not just beggars, but we must just use that endowment for our benefit as a continent. But if, as a continent, we are frightened, we fear everything, we are going to collapse, and will collapse with minerals at our doorstep.
You will cut your funding to South Africa, and we will withhold our minerals. Carol, that's quite a Gwede thing to say.
It is. I mean, that's actually been the response of a lot of world leaders to say, well, you put tariffs on us, we put tariffs on you. And South Africa does export, I mean, we more than anything else, we do export minerals to the US. So, that didn't surprise me. I don't think Cyril Ramaphosa is going to
say the same thing,
or follow up in that vein. But it's a whole new world, and the whole world has to get used to how we're dealing with this.
Yeah.
You know, to take, for instance, a position against a slogan like solidarity. What is it? Solidarity. What is the G20?
I mean, climate change issues as
inclusion.
well.
And sustainability. Just to say, well, that just means diversity, more diversity, nonsense, and climate change. It's just so
it's unheard of
to the whole kind of human rights ethos of all the multilateral institutions. So it's a frightening world.
It is I don't know how brave, but it is a new world, and we're going to have to get used to it. Carol, what does this mean for a normal News24 reader or viewer sitting at home tonight, hearing all these things, seeing Trump's tweets, seeing Marco Rubio's tweets that he's not coming to the G20, what does it mean to South Africans that the US might pull out of the G20, that the US might cut off all US aid and PEPFAR funding?
Look, the aid question is certainly an issue, and it's not that it's massive amounts. It's just $400 million or so, which is quite a lot for us. But it's not like everything's going to collapse. But a lot of health sector NGOs will collapse, and even there are even employees in the Department of Health. I think 200 of them who are now not going to get paid. So for South Africans, it means, well, somebody has to find the money to plug that gap. So that's a question for the budget in 10 days' time or 2 weeks' time. And unfortunately, we're in a situation where we don't have a lot of extra cash. We certainly don't have $400 million that could easily be found in our tight budget. So that's the one issue. And then I think for South Africans, it's not good for our economy. I mean, if we lose access, trade access, preferential trade access, if we lose preferential trade access, that will affect us. That will affect our agricultural sector. It'll affect wine. It'll affect a lot of our citrus. And it will affect our auto sector, which is our manufacturing sector, which has a whole lot of downstream sort of industries associated with it. So all of that it would not be good at all for South Africa. And from the tone that they're taking, it seems to be, that when AGOA comes up for renewal in September, either they will scrap the thing entirely, or they will certainly revise it, and I think that they're looking for a way to punish us, and that might be it.
So, Andisiwe, effectively, if we kicked out of AGOA, job losses in South Africa, income losses, and specifically also for commercial farmers. Ironically, the group of people that the likes of AfriForum have been agitating for on their behalf with their trips to Washington. Isn't that ironic?
It is ironic. And actually, I see on social media people have been quick to remind AfriForum that you have been driving this disinformation campaign, and actually you stand to lose. So the whole thing now seems like it is backfiring on them. But I also want to go back to the president's response to this whole thing. I think, we all get frustrated with how slowly he does things, how calm he is sometimes when we think he should be taking action. But I think it's exactly the man that we need at this moment, because he does understand what we stand to lose as South Africa, and he understands that he has to be measured. He can't antagonize them any further, and I think maybe it is he's on the right path in dealing with the matters in the way that he does and engaging them any further. And I think if beyond what he's tried to do, and if they continue, then I don't think there was anything that was going to save us in the first place. But yeah, it is very scary for South Africa, considering our job situation as it is, and for the GNU, because job creation is one of its key priorities.
I saw yesterday a number, I think it was in a press statement by a group of health NGOs that said almost 900,000 people could lose their access to clinics and ARVs and medical facilities. So that's quite a catastrophe, and something that the South African government will have to stand in for. Andisiwe, I do want to move on to this issue of foreign relationships. South Africa has always tried since the Mandela days to play all the sides. We are non-aligned. We are friends with Saudi Arabia and with America, with China, and with the EU. The ICJ case, the fact that we went to the International Court of Justice against Israel, who is a big ally of the United States, was of the Democratic government and is of the Republican-led government. That hasn't been expressly stated by either Trump or Rubio or Elon Musk as the reason for this, but I think certainly have a strong suspicion that may be one of the reasons America is also coming after us now. Do you think, in hindsight, looking back, that South Africa has maybe bitten off too much in terms of foreign policy, and that we kind of maybe infringed on our non-aligned stance, and that we made life a bit harder for ourselves by going that route?
I think we did. But then again, I think it was always to be expected because the ANC, which was governing South Africa at the time we went to the ICJ, has this historic tension with Israel, which goes back to the days of apartheid, has this historic relationship with the Palestinians, and it wasn't a surprise that they took that line, but I think, yes, it was quite a big step, and I think now we are paying for those decisions. So it's a difficult one. I mean, they had to make a standpoint because they believe in what they were pushing for.
And we won. We won the case.
We won, yeah, we won maybe round 1 and round 2 of the case. Yeah. So, but I think we are paying for that.
Carol, can you see us walking back on that matter if that would...
No. You know, this is the problem with what is happening, is that South Africa cannot walk back on something like that. You know, it can't walk back on the Palestinian people. That I think is not something that can be done within our sort of society. So I don't see that as being possible. And also the emphasis on race-based redress. And the kind of comments coming out of Washington that, you know, these policies are outdated and you should move on and get with the rest of the world. You know, the principle of redress, I think we can all discuss the implementation and the instances where it's actually been counterproductive because it has been anti-growth. And surely we should be at a point now where we're saying, look, we need to grow if we're going to save this economy. But to deny the principle of redress and say we're no longer interested in redress after 300 years of colonialism and the kind of colonialism we had, I think is not doable. So that's the problem we're in. You know, they're making actually an impossible demand on us.
It was interesting to see the reaction of the main two GNU partners, the ANC and the DA, after Trump's message. Pretty united, pretty on the same page on this issue. Ramaphosa, Stena's in statements saying the same thing. We are not grabbing land. We have an expropriation act that every country in the world has to expropriate land for public interest purposes. Even the United States have something similar. As you said earlier, the act now allows for nil, but under certain conditions only. Right. And it could still be challenged in court. I want to move on to the stuff we really should have spoken about tonight before Trump happened, which is the GNU. So last year, and you see where we've seen the opposition politicians, as the DA was then, heckling the president, making all kinds of noises during the Sona speech, etc. Carol, do you expect something different this year? The DA is now part of the GNU. There's 10 parties that are part of this government. The DA, of course, the biggest partner, the IFP, also up there. Do you expect something more civil and ceremonious tonight rather than the raucousness we've become accustomed to?
I think so. I mean, look, MK is an unknown quantity. Anything can happen. I think that the EFF trick of disruption, it has worn a bit thin and not really going to have much effect. So I do think so, and I think that hopefully it will be a unifying event. I think that. From the point of view of like what the message is, I think the message will be is a lot more positive than a year ago. We're in a better place. You know, we're moving in the right direction at this point, which a year ago wasn't that clear that we were doing that.
In fact, a year ago when we sat at this table, you were laughing at the idea of no more load shedding, but we'll get back to that in a second. Let's listen to what John Steenhuisen, the leader of the DA and the Minister of Agriculture in the GNU, had to say this week during his party's version of the State of the Nation.
I'd like to use this opportunity to clarify some misconceptions on the DA's position on the Expropriation Act. Let me be very clear. The protection of private property rights is the cornerstone of any economy. The DA has always championed and supported this. And that's why we fought so hard, invested so much, and expended so much energy defeating the amendment to Section 25 of the Constitution. The DA is strongly of the opinion that the Expropriation Act is unconstitutional, as was pointed out Prime Minister Macpherson to the President, and as I've said consistently in press conferences since, and our view has not changed. We will continue to use the GNU structures to mount our opposition to the law from within government, as was announced at the press conference on the 25th of January. As I said at that time, and in the immediate aftermath of the signing of the bill, we will approach the courts, arguing that this act is indeed procedurally and substantively unconstitutional. And that position has not changed. I don't, however, think that it is.
And that is John Steenhuisen speaking. He's the Minister of Agriculture and the leader of the DA. I almost said the leader of the opposition. He's no longer the leader of the opposition. That is the Honourable Dr. John Globe from the MK party now. But John Steenhuisen, leader of the DA, Minister of Agriculture, also clarifying, of course, the issue of expropriation without compensation and that there are no land grabs in South Africa, as Donald Trump believes. And you see where tonight we will hear the President speak about the GNU. It's now been 7, almost 8 months of GNU government. What do you expect him to say about the GNU and the prognosis of how things have been going?
I expect the President to repeat his message that this was, first of all, the only direction that we could have taken in South Africa after the elections. He is positive about the government that we have. And we should remember that there are detractors of the GNU, including in his own party. So I expect a positive message from the President. We know that there's been stability in the country. Things could have gone either way when there is no outright majority. So I expect a speech that is going to talk further about economic growth. We expect him to talk about addressing the issue of youth unemployment, but youth unemployment in the main. We expect the President to again address issues like your water crisis. It's an even bigger issue today than we had an electricity crisis this time last year. We expect him to talk, I don't know if he will probably go into issues like the implementation of the Bella Bill, which is in a stage where now we are drafting regulations. So I expect him to touch on a whole range of issues that South Africans want to hear about, because I think your average South African wants to hear if they'll be getting jobs, if they'll be getting water out of your taps, more than hearing about what Trump has said. As much as that message is important, but for ordinary citizens, these are the issues that are critical.
And whether load shedding is back for good, or if it was just a blip. Carol, let's talk about the NHI, National Health Insurance. I mean, you've written a strong piece about it recently before this week's developments, where you said this is the big issue. This is the red line issue for the DA in the GNU that could make or break the GNU. And then this week, Andy Siwe's team came with this exclusive interview with Marupin Ramakgopa, who's the powerful and influential minister in the presidency responsible for planning. On the record saying, we've solved our differences with the DA. We are no longer fighting whether medical aids should be collapsed or not. Medical aids are there to stay, and we'll still see the writing of how it goes, but we found each other on the sidelines of the cabinet Lekgotla. Were you surprised with this development?
No.
Nothing surprises Carol Payton.
No, I wasn't surprised. I think that all along there's had to be some sort of compromise on the NHI. I think where we go with the NHI from here is that we certainly will have an NHI in the sense of we certainly will have a system of financing poorer people through a kind of contributory system. We'll certainly have that. But how exactly that gets implemented and whether it would be a wise thing to actually collapse everything into one pot and no longer have private medical aids, or whether you really should be trying to get more people out of the public system and into the private system through arrangements that you could make. And arrangements because you've got undercapacity in private sector. And so there are lots of things that can be done. There are lots of of mechanisms that can be introduced that could bring down the costs of medical aid, that could bring down the costs of private healthcare, and that could make the private sector healthcare accessible to the wider population. So things can be done, and I think that was always going to have to happen, because the way that the NHI was pushed through was highly ideological. So it was actually the finer details we've never actually seen. There's the finer details of how this gets funded, where the money comes from, whether that's realistic. You're going to raise people's personal income tax by 4 percentage points. Is that realistic? Can you really do that? So these sorts of details haven't been worked out. And so we now have to get to grips with how this thing's going to work. So I wasn't too surprised. I think we'll see, what the final wording is, because this story that appeared earlier this week around the compromise, I think is exactly that. It was a kind of a sidelines compromise, and that plan still has to get passed by the cabinet, and so it'll be interesting to see what the final wording is.
Yeah.
And
if I may
yes,
chip in.
Yes.
Actually, I just remember that last October the cabinet couldn't adopt
That's right.
the mid-term plan.
Yeah.
Because they were disagreeing over the NHI.
Exactly.
So I think the fact that they could adopt it last week means there is, although we don't know the details, but it tells you that they are finding each other somehow. Because I remember that issue was deferred to this Lihotla from October last year.
Exactly.
And maybe just tell our readers a bit more about the medium-term development plan, because that's a term that I think we'll hear a lot about tonight in the speech.
Well, it is basically government's program for the next 5 years. It is more detailed than I'm explaining it, but it's basically the GNU's plan priorities for the next 5 years, and then it goes into detail about how each department should be implementing those plans so that at the end of the day we have this economic growth, we deal with job losses, and we have a capable and developmental state.
Which was one of the 3 strategic areas for the GNU as per the President's speech in July last year.
That's correct.
Although, Carol, I mean, let's be clear, the NHI, the funding for it is completely unclear still. The Minister of Finance, Ino Godongwana, who must tell us what the national budget is, must probably still figure out how he's going to fund the project.
Yeah, and Godongwana has shown that he's in no hurry. I mean, at the moment we've got a very tight fiscal situation. If we don't cut spending and therefore, reduce borrowing, we will be overwhelmed by our debt, because that's how debt costs rise, and the more they rise, the more they overwhelm you. And so he's in no rush. He's in no rush to create an NHI or to add taxes that are going to contribute to the NHI. So I don't think we're going to get anything. I don't think there's going to be any immediate progress.
Well, let's see how the President spins that tonight. I'm looking at a screen of Parliament now, sitting at the Cape Town City Hall. At the moment, we have the military band playing, the brass band playing in front of the Cape Town City Hall. We can see the orchestra doing their thing. We have seen the red carpet being rolled out, the dignitaries, many of them already inside. And we're now waiting for the arrival of the dignitaries. Earlier, we saw Chief Justice Mandisa Maya and the judiciary arriving at Cape Town City Hall. There's the military, a few hundred, it seems, soldiers standing there. And in less than 30 minutes now, the President Cyril Ramaphosa will deliver the State of the Nation address. Carol, I want to go back to July last year. So this was shortly after the election of the GNU, or the deal that gave us the GNU, ANC, DA, IFP, and some small parties coming together. And the President had a opening of Parliament address. It wasn't called a Sona in July last year, where he said there's 3 things that we have decided on, that we have agreed on to do as the GNU. So this is now the ANC, DA, IFP, and all the parties sitting around the table, including Gator McKenzie from the Patriotic Alliance. First one was drive inclusive growth and job creation. The second one was to reduce poverty and tackle the high cost of living. And the third one was the building of a capable, ethical and developmental state. Can you two basically help me just to talk through these strategic areas? whether you've seen any movement on any of them over the past 7-8 months. It hasn't been a hell of a long time, but it's also been 8 months. So what have you seen happening in these spheres?
Well, I think, look, on the growth front, there hasn't been much progress. Also, what we did see was a kind of upward blip in the sort of confidence, in business confidence. So the GNU did give us a bit of a kick up. But, you know, things are tight. Consumers are still very cash-strapped, so there's not a lot of demand in the economy. So, the forecast is not great. We're not going to suddenly grow. I mean, we can maybe, at best, edge up towards 2%, and we've averaged 1%, which is lower than population growth for the last sort of 15 years. So on growth, we haven't seen anything. I think that what has happened with regards to growth is that government's structural reform program has really got some traction. And although we're not seeing it in the numbers yet, I think what we are seeing is a situation in which the reforms that have been made to their electricity sector and to the transport sector are now irreversible. It's going to be very hard to reverse her. So we are going to be seeing the introduction of a competitive electricity market. And we are going to be seeing the introduction of third-party operators onto the freight rail system. So those sorts of reforms are the things that we need to do to unlock growth. And so I think there's been a lot of progress made there. I do hope we start to see it in the numbers soon.
And you see, one of the other big things that I have noticed, and tell me if you agree, was what seems like almost incredible leaps made at the Department of Home Affairs under Dr. Leon Schreiber, the minister from the DA, who has literally liberated the visa system, reformed the visa system in a few months. It's almost incredible to think that it could have been done that fast. Are you in agreement with me that was also a big
Actually,
shift?
we recently ran a funny story about how in 2024, if you wanted a job at Home Affairs, you had to fill in the government Z83 form. You had to submit your CV in hard copy. I mean, those are like legal small things that you do not understand. Why were they still doing this in 2024? So he's come across and brought these changes. It's like your little mini things, and he did it with a budget that was already allocated. It was done in-house, and he's introduced a program where you have small companies bringing in tourists from India and China, and it's, you know, those legal sprouts here and there, they've made so many changes. Yes, he's dealt with the backlog on the visa applications. I think they had 316,000 applications that they had to deal with. And by December last year, that was all resolved. That frees up the staff to now deal with the new applications. And it makes so much difference for people that need that service. We all have to go to Home Affairs. If it's not for birth certificate, for ID, for passport, for death certificates, we stand there in long queues for days on end. So by him tackling these issues, and when you listen to him, it's like, how was this not figured out in 30 years? So I guess he should get a mention in tonight's speech. And he's so big on digital migrating Home Affairs. I mean, the government 10 years ago introduced, it was a pilot project where you could go to the banks to get your smart card ID. It was introduced at 30 banks. 10 years later, it is still at 30 banks. It's working well. Why didn't you expand it? So those are the legal things that I don't think they are big things that is done. Those legal things have made so much difference. And I think it should get a shout out from the president.
And Carol, that's an example of the GNU working. And
Exactly,
I mean, someone like Schreiber and the DA will take points from that, right?
Absolutely. You know, look, the DA is not shy about telling us how good they are. So we've all heard a lot of that. I think just to comment, you know, on this sort of dramatic improvement that he's made. I think that and the sort of progress at Eskom, where they have actually really improved the performance of their plant, I mean, shows that things can be turned around. Change is possible, and so I think that's really inspiring and something really good. I hope that it would be great if we could get some similar momentum into something like the mining sector, which would make a tremendous difference to livelihoods if we could do that.
Cost of living, have we seen any major change?
Look, inflation is lower than it has been for a very long, ever, I think. So inflation is under control. I mean, obviously that has come at a cost. That has come at a cost of high interest rates, and so we've had very little demand in the economy as a result. But cost of living, inflation's under control. I think the big problem still is that people are still trying to catch up, debt and those sorts of problems that makes it really difficult to catch up and to actually feel a difference. But prices are certainly not rocketing up the way they were.
So if you're at home and you haven't felt that GNU effect in your pocket when you go to the shops, that is a real feeling. It may not have come yet, but what we're hearing from my esteemed colleagues here is that some of the structural problems that we have in South Africa has started to being fixed. Things like load shedding, things like the visa system and the transport system. We now see the dignitaries arriving. Who is that? That is the Deputy President Paul Mashatile and his wife arriving at the City Hall of Cape Town, sitting as Parliament. Carol, let's talk about Eskom, your favorite topic in the world.
Yes.
300 plus days without load shedding, and we must make the sum. It must put the sign up somewhere. It's 30 something.
Yeah.
And then last weekend, bang, load shedding. What do you think is going to be the line tonight from the president around Eskom, turning it around?
Yeah, I think he must be quite sad that he's not going to be able to say, 300 and something
not
days of not out. But yeah, unfortunately it happened. To the credit of the Eskom execs, I mean, they have said from the get-go, they said this January and February is danger. We're in a danger period, and we were all rah, in December, look at what, it's gone, load shedding's gone. And none of them would ever say, none of them said load shedding is over. And they always said, well, we take out a lot of plant for maintenance in summer, and if something goes wrong, well, we can hit problems, and so it happened. But I do think that we've turned the corner. I think we have got more plant coming online, and I think we hopefully we unfortunately there's no sort of lower prices are not in sight. I think we're going to carry on paying quite high electricity tariffs.
I had an interesting debate on the weekend with some friends around who should be credited for the Eskom turnaround, because I'm sure the previous folk like De Ruyter and Uberholzer will say, well, we started the maintenance program. There was no maintenance when we came there, and the new guys kind of inherited the successes we started.
No,
What's your
I don't
take on
agree.
that?
I don't agree with that. You see, the problem is that De Ruyter was fighting with one arm tied behind his back, So the kind of things that changed the situation were the procurement system, whereas De Ruyter had to buy through these middlemen, and he wasn't allowed to, procure directly from original equipment manufacturers. That changed, and a second thing that changed, for instance, was incentives. He wasn't allowed to pay any bonuses, and bonuses were brought back for the production, for the generation staff, and that changed. That really changed a lot of things. De Ruyter, I think they did start to put systems in place, like basic things like control, inventory, and that sort of thing. I think also at the time that De Ruyter was head of Eskom, the crime was rampant, and organised crime was in control of Eskom. And I think that's changed, and it's a kind of the missing link, which I feel I want to still explore, is to look at how exactly did that happen. We know they improved security and policing and so on, but I think there's something bigger than that. I think there's some bigger sort of organised crime. The impact of syndicates somehow has receded from Eskom
The S word, sabotage.
Yeah,
We heard that a lot previously. It is interesting, and we will closely listen to what the president has to say about who he's creating. The Minister of Electricity, President Ramaphosa, will probably also get a shout out, Andisiwe.
Yes, I agree. I mean, yeah, last weekend must have killed the president's spirit because it just, imagine that 310, 20 days of electricity, and now you have to go back to scratch. But yeah, I mean, South Africans are very positive towards Minister Ramaphosa. I think it's the only minister that people actually like because you can see the results, you know, every time you switch on and the lights come on. So I think he will probably get a shout out.
It was chaos in my house when we had to find those little Builders Warehouse lights again. They weren't charged, so you had to get candles. So I hope that's a thing of the past. Carol, I want to talk about rail. One of your other hobbies is studying Transnet very closely. And we've really seen major achievements in this space. And it's a bit of an unsexy story, but incredibly important to get the economy going, to get the coal going. Tell us what's happened in that space with Operation Vulindlela, with the private sector involvement, and why can the president be proud of that tonight?
Well, look, the thing is, nothing big has happened yet, but we are sort of on the cusp of things happening. So we are on the cusp of bringing private operators onto the rail, and looking at different and private involvement in refurbishing the rail infrastructure. So what has happened there is that the unbundling, you know, Transnet, we've spoken a lot more about Eskom unbundling into these different companies. Same thing is happening at Transnet. Transnet must also unbundle. You've got to separate the train business from the rail, from the actual rails, and that separation has begun. And private operators are showing interest in coming on and running those lines. So we haven't seen a real uptick yet in the numbers. This was slight. I think Transnet had their 6 monthly results. I think they showed a small increase in volumes. I think it was 5%. I think so. We haven't really seen the uptick yet. But I think that, you know, there is a different sense. There's a plan. I think it's not going fast enough, and I think government and Operation Vulindlela are very aware that the change is not coming, a Transnet just not coming fast enough. So I think that there's more could be done. I think government could do more. I think that government could boost, for instance, the board, the Eskom board, the Transnet board. So they need to take those steps if they really want to see change happen.
But it has started, and hopefully that train is unstoppable. Andisiwe, corruption and crime, a big topic always during Sona. Anything that you expect the president to say tonight that we haven't heard?
Oh, well, yeah, that's a topic that is frustrating for many South Africans, especially after the Zondo Commission made all these findings, made all these recommendations, and we are yet to see not forget just the big wigs, but we haven't seen much success in prosecuting them. We want to see people in jail. I understand that we are recouping some of the monies, but we are far from being happy as South Africans in general. So I expect him probably to repeat the same message, that we are tightening things, we are working with the NPA, we have the investigative directorate now being a permanent feature within the NPA.
It took 5 years, but we have it now.
It took forever, but we got there eventually. So now we want things to start rolling. And unfortunately, it makes me nervous because the NDPP's term, as much as people would say, but he has really not prosecuted people, I feel that she came at a time when the NPA was completely hollowed and she had to bring some sort of stability. And her term is going to end without us seeing the fruit of that.
Any state capture convictions.
That's correct.
We're seeing President Cyril Ramaphosa has just arrived at the Cape Town City Hall, and he's now being greeted by the dignitaries of Parliament, including Toko Didiza, the Speaker. They are now moving closer to Parliament. Do you know who's accompanying him tonight?
I don't know the young lady, but it's definitely not Dr. Motsepe.
It's not his wife, Dr. Motsepe.
It's not his wife.
Hopefully a daughter. We'll find out later from our colleagues who were there. But President Ramaphosa, he's there. He looks somewhat
nervous.
tense and nervous. It is the big show of the year. Let's wait. In a few minutes, it will all be revealed what he's about to say.
It is also his 10th Sona. Since he became president in 2018, so
wow,
it's quite
been a long time. It has been a long time since the Tumamina moment. That was 2018. We're now in 2025. It is 7 years later, and you see where it is quite a stark reality that we'll probably go into the next tenure of a new National Director of Public Prosecutions without even as much as one state capture conviction. Quite an indictment on the NPA. The NPA insiders obviously say that it has been such a struggle just to get the organisation onto its feet again, to get enough money, to get permanency for the IDAC, the Investigating Directorate Against Corruption. But I think we all wanted to see a bit more faster movement at this time. I want to quickly talk about the opposition before we almost end out. The president is now coming onto the podium with Speaker Toko Didiza, and we are hearing the fighter jets also approaching over the Cape Town skyline. The national anthem is now going to be played, and that's normally followed by the 21-gun salute. But before we wrap up for the night and listen to the president, Andisiwe Makinana, what do you expect from the official opposition, which is the MK party tonight? We know Jacob Zuma is not there.
The official opposition is still trying to figure its role in this parliament. It's been 8 months, and it's really difficult to tell what kind of opposition we have because, they are filling a role that was occupied by DA, which was just absolutely delightful as opposition, that challenged everything, that knew how parliament works. You get a sense that the opposition that we have today is still. And with the changes that are happening in the MK party every second week, every month, it's really hard for them to sort of establish themselves and to also get into grip with what they should be doing. I hope there will be no disruption of the speech at least, but they are opposed to to the very notion of a government of national unity. So we expect them to oppose everything that will be said because they don't even believe that we have a government of national unity.
Carol Payton, just as someone asked me earlier this morning, do we miss the DA as opposition? And I actually said yes, because I thought, the DA was a very good opposition party. The amount of questions they submitted to the ministers, you're nodding your head.
Absolutely, yeah, no, they were very, very, very good. And, sometimes their tone was a bit jarring, but now we miss it. There's nobody that who's really, you don't get a sense in Parliament that the question times that I've watched have really been pretty boring.
And you feel that the DA is also conflicted because someone like Siviwe Gwarube, the Minister of Basic Education, this year had to announce a matric results number of 80-90%. I don't know what it was, very high. But the DA was always the first one to come out the next day and say, well, the real matric pass rate is lower than 50% because if you track kids who were in grade 1 who's now in matric or who wrote their matric, almost half of them dropped out along the way. So the DA seems to be struggling still, and this identity.
Also struggling with its identity, especially in Parliament, because just a handful of them made it into the executive. So the rest of the DA caucus doesn't know whether it is executive or it is opposition. As a result, it is the most quiet party in Parliament at the moment because they can't really oppose because they are part of this government. At the same time, there's a large number of MPs who don't, still trying to figure out what their role is. It is one of the issues that I think they have to deal with. The sooner they do that, the better.
Well, the President and his entourage have now entered the Cape Town City Hall for this year's State of the Nation address. And we will be with you during the night as News24. We will bring you quick analysis of the President's speech, his big announcements, and what it means for you, the South African public. Thank you very much for joining us. Carol Payton, as always, thank you. So nice having you on set. And Andy Siwe Makinana for the first time. That was fun. Thanks for joining me. And now the real work starts. Thank you for watching and listening to us. Please stay tuned to News24 during the night as well as tomorrow when you bring you quality, trusted journalism. From me, Adrian Basson, thank you and good night.
umongameli wesizwe njengani ntateze ntathe njewule nanku mthako mnyama nje bosepho umbhayibhayi kwezopolitiko kalokuyani enye yokududuba bengazuluqaba uzuthi wakunyuka loo ntaba ungalibali ukunyeka emva ukuzuthi wakudibana nemidlambila kwingcaphu yentaba umemeza ucamaku madola amnyama eAfrika qhubeka kusiphatha ngezo zandla zingenamikhinqi nditsho wena sifuba sibanzi sokweleka abasweleyo xhalabali banzi lokwethula imithwalo kwabasindwayo nditsho wena sangola hachivase muduhulu waralusiwelo Matamelo, a hero with roots in Soweto, the son of the soil, a man of courage, with strength and grace. You are the voice to the voiceless, an eye to the blind, and a shoulder to the disabled. Ndlovena babata yaleka namabantu bakho ulapho nje ubekwe ngokuthenjwa nditsho wena Ramaphosa ntoka Samueli mawethu ilanga liyashona amasoma khalisa amakhwelo igusha ziququzelela ngasekhaya mandikeka my president mandikeka my cupcake ndikham
Order, honorable members. Honorable members, there will now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. As we do that, may we please acknowledge our fallen members of the armed forces in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Thank you, and please be seated. Order, honorable members. Honorable members, the President has called this joint sitting of the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces in terms of Section 84, subsection 2D of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, read with Joint Rule 13, subsection 1A, to deliver his State of the Nation address to Parliament. I now call on the Honourable the President to address the joint sitting. Honorable members. Order, honorable members, can we please take our seats? Honorable members. Honorable members, can we please take your seat and allow the President to address the House and the nation?
Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Toko Didiza, Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Ms. Refilwe Ntshweni-Tsipane, Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Paul Mashatile, Chief Justice of the Republic, Mandi Samaya, and Judges President, former President of the Republic, Mr. Thabo Mbeki, former President Kgalema Motlanthe, former Deputy President David Mabuza, former Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Baleka Mbete, former Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Mr. Lichisa Tsinodi, and former Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Mr. Amos Masondo, Mayor of the City of Cape Town, Mr. Gordon Hill-Lewis, Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, Regional Deans, and Heads of Missions, Members of Parliament, and fellow South Africans. We gather here as we mourn the death and tragic death and devastating loss of 14 South African soldiers who were part of a mission to bring peace to the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. We pay tribute and bow our heads to Staff Sergeant William Eddie Ola, Staff Sergeant Mulahlehi Ishmael Mulahlehi, Staff Sergeant Shahlane Theophilus Siepe, Corporal Matume Justice Malisa, Corporal Renae Nemabudani, Lance Bombardier Itumeleng MacDonald Mureo, Lance Corporal Tseke Moffat Molapo, Lance Corporal Metsi Stensley Raswiswi, Rifleman Sibatane Richard Chokwe, Rifleman Derek Maluleke, Rifleman Tsidiso Andris Mabele, Rifleman Calvin Louis Moahi, Rifleman Moketi Joseph Mobe, Private Peter Jacobus Strado. Speaker, I thank you for getting us to honor these fallen heroes. I have directed that a national flag be flown at half-mast in honor of these fallen heroes for a week starting from tomorrow morning. Alongside soldiers from other southern African countries, they lost their lives in defense of the fundamental right of the Congolese people to live in peace and security. They lost their lives not in the pursuit of resources or territory or power. They lost their lives so that the guns on our continent may be forever silenced. So we salute them. My fellow South Africans, this State of the Nation address is taking place as we celebrate 70 years since the adoption of the Freedom Charter at the Congress of the People in Kliptown in 1955. The Freedom Charter is the cornerstone of our democratic constitution. It sets out a vision of a united, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic and prosperous South Africa. It also sets out a vision of a country in which government is founded on the will of the people of South Africa, where the land is shared among those who work it, where the people share in the country's wealth and in all that the country produces and are all equal before the law. It is this vision that continues to guide us as we work to build the nation that we all want. It is the spirit of the Congress of the People that inspires us as we prepare for a national dialogue in which South Africans are once again called upon to chart a new path for our country. We must chart this path in a world that is rapidly changing. It is a world of both interdependence and competition, of cooperation and conflict. It is a multipolar world in which new countries are emerging to play a greater role in global affairs. We are seeing intensifying competition over issues such as trade, technology, and influence in global institutions. There are global fundamental shifts underway that affect every aspect of human life, from the growing impact of climate change to rapid advances in artificial intelligence, geopolitical tensions, and violent conflicts. In the face of these challenges, we are witnessing the rise of nationalism, protectionism, the pursuit of narrow interests, and the decline of common cause. This is the world that we, as South Africa, a developing economy, must now navigate. But we are not daunted to navigate our path through this world that constantly changes. We will not be deterred. We are, as South Africans, a resilient people, and we will not be bullied. We will stand together as a united nation, and we will speak with one voice in defense of our national interests, our sovereignty, and our constitutional democracy. By standing true to our values, by harnessing our unique strengths and endowments, and by forging a common purpose, we can turn these trying circumstances to our advantage and propel our country forward. As South Africans, we stand for peace and justice. We stand for equality and solidarity. We stand for a non-racial future, and we stand for democracy and tolerance as well as compassion. We stand for equal rights for women, for persons with disability, and for members of the LGBTQIA+ community. We stand for our shared humanity, not for the survival of the fittest. So this evening, let us speak of the nation that we want. Let us speak of the future that we want to build. let us speak of the work that we as South Africans must do and the work that we are doing to build that nation and to build that future. We want a nation united in its diversity. At many difficult moments in our past, we found strength in working together towards a common goal. Through partnership, we brought peace and democracy to our country which was once troubled. We overcame apartheid, a crime against humanity that denied people their human rights, that deprived them of the land and livelihoods, that sought to strip them of their dignity, that humiliated them. Through partnership, we overcame a devastating pandemic and rebuilt our country in the wake of state capture as well. Together, we have built durable institutions that support our democracy, that protect our fundamental rights and promote the well-being of South Africans. We have built meaningful partnerships between government and business and labor and civil society and other social partners to drive growth and development. These stand as models of cooperation for the rest of the world. Is to grow our economy so that we can create jobs, reduce poverty, and improve the lives of South Africans. To undertake this task, we need a government that works for the people. We need a state that is capable, competent, underpinned by. To achieve these objectives, we are strengthening the role of the Public Service Commission in the appointment of key people who direct the affairs of our state, such as Directors General, Deputy Directors General, Chief Executive Officers of SOEs and board members and other senior positions. We will introduce a graduate recruitment scheme so that we may attract the best and the brightest in the public service. A capable state must start where our people live and work. In many cities and towns across our country, roads are not maintained. Water and electricity supply is often disrupted. Refuse is not collected, and sewage runs in the streets. In part, this has happened because many municipalities lack the technical skills and resources required to meet our people's needs. Many municipalities have not reinvested the revenue they earn or collect from these services into the upkeep of infrastructure. Starting this year, we will work with our municipalities to establish professionally managed ring-fenced utilities for water and electricity services to ensure that there is adequate investment and maintenance. Many of the challenges in municipalities also arise from the design of our local government system. We will therefore undertake extensive consultation to develop an updated white paper on local government to outline a modern and fit-for-purpose local government system. We will also review the funding model for municipalities. We will do so because many of our municipalities truly do not have a viable and sustainable revenue base. We will work with traditional leaders in the implementation of local development programs. We will also seek to work with our traditional leaders in ensuring that they continue their own work as we give them the recognition as the natural and indigenous leaders of our people. We will expand our support to municipalities that require assistance, drawing on the lessons of the Presidential eThekwini Working Group. We are seeing great progress in eThekwini as we implement the district development model, which enables all key role players, as in government, business, labor, and community-based organizations, to work together. As we work to reform the public service and build the capability of the state, we will harness technology to transform the way government works. We will invest in digital public infrastructure to give South Africans access to government services anytime, anywhere through a relaunched government gov.za platform. At the heart of this transformation will be the implementation of a digital identity system. Now, these measures will in the end transform the relationship between citizens and government and create one government that is accessible to every person at a touch. We want a nation with a thriving economy, an economy that benefits all. To create this virtuous cycle of investment, growth, and jobs, we must lift economic growth to above 3%. To achieve higher levels of economic growth, we are undertaking massive investment in new infrastructure while upgrading and maintaining the infrastructure that we have. We are developing innovative ways of funding infrastructure. We are engaging local and international finance institutions and investors to unlock 100 billion rand in infrastructure financing. A project preparation bid window has been launched to fast-track investment readiness. This includes revised regulations for public-private partnerships, which will unlock private sector expertise and funds. And government will spend more than 940 billion rand on infrastructure over the next 3 years. Now, this includes 375 billion rand in spending by state-owned enterprises. This funding will revitalize our roads and bridges. It will build dams and waterways. It will modernize our ports and airports and also power our economy. Through the infrastructure fund that we launched some time ago, 12 blended finance projects worth nearly 38 billion rand have been approved in the last year. These are projects in water and sanitation, student accommodation, transport, health and energy as well. Construction of the M10 bridge in the Eastern Cape, the construction continues. This bridge will rise above the river between Port Edward and Lusikisiki and will become the tallest bridge in Africa. The Podihadi Dam in Lesotho will feed 490 million cubic liters of water a year from the Lesotho highlands into the Vaal River system, securing water supply to several provinces for years to come. Working with international partners, we are revitalizing small harbors, unlocking economic opportunities for coastal communities. We're also looking very closely at the harbor that we will build in the Northern Cape, in Boegoebaai, because that is going to be a game changer for the Northern Cape. We are steadily removing the obstacles to meaningful and faster growth. The economic reforms that we are implementing through Operation Vulindlela have created a new sense of optimism and confidence in our economy. Investors are looking at South Africa with much more interesting eyes as they see the reforms that we are implemented through Vulindlela. We have made progress in rebuilding and restructuring a number of our network industries. We are seeing positive results in the improvement of the functioning of our network industries, as well as the investment opportunities that are opening up and are being taken up by investors, leading to job creation. Working together with business, labor, and other social partners, we must now finish the work that we started. Over the coming year, we will initiate a second wave of reform to unleash more rapid and inclusive growth. Our immediate focus is to enable Eskom, Transnet, and other state-owned enterprises that are vital to our economy to function optimally. We are repositioning these entities to provide world-class infrastructure while enabling competition in operations, whether in electricity generation, freight, rail, or port terminals. We continue with the fundamental reform of our state-owned enterprises to ensure that they can effectively fulfill their social and economic mandates. Now, this includes the work underway to put in place a new model to strengthen governance and oversight of our public entities. We will ensure public ownership of strategic infrastructure for public benefit while finding innovative ways to attract private investment, to improve services, and to ensure public revenue can be focused on the provision of public services. We are in the process of establishing a dedicated SOE reform unit to coordinate this work. The measures we have implemented through the Energy Action Plan have reduced the severity and frequency of load shedding, with more than 300 days without load shedding since March 2024. Now, while the return of load shedding for 2 days last week was a reminder that our energy supply is still constrained, we remain on a very positive trajectory, whether people like it or not. We now need to put the risk of load shedding behind us once and for all. And the Minister of Electricity will speak about it in about 2 weeks or so when he presents to Parliament. We need to put that once and for all behind us by completing the reform of our energy system to ensure long-term energy security. The Electricity Regulation Amendment Act which came into effect on the 1st of January, marks the beginning of a new era in our energy architecture. This year, we will put in place the building blocks of a competitive electricity market. Over time, this will allow multiple electricity generation entities to emerge and to compete. We will mobilize private sector investment in our transmission network to connect more renewable energy to the grid. The Minister will tell us that we still need to install 14,000 kilometers of transmission lines. We therefore need to mobilize finance from a number of sources to enable this to happen. As we reform our energy system, we are continuing to build successful multilateral partnerships in the global effort to halt the devastating impact of climate change. Our just energy transition is gaining momentum. Over $13 billion have been pledged by the international community, and significant private capital is being invested locally. We are determined to meet our carbon reduction commitments and will do so at a pace and at a scale that our country can afford. We are revitalizing our port terminals and rail corridors through the Freight Logistics Roadmap, which was adopted by Cabinet, leveraging private capital to restore our logistics infrastructure to world-class standards. Transnet's performance has stabilized and is steadily improving. We released a network statement in December last year, which for the first time will enable private rail operators to access the freight rail system that will continue to be owned by the state. Open access to the rail network will allow train operation companies to increase the volume of goods transported by rail, while our network infrastructure remains state-owned. This will ensure that South African minerals, the vehicles that we manufacture, our agricultural produce reach international markets, securing jobs and earning much-needed revenue for our fiscus. New cranes and other port equipment are being commissioned to speed up the loading and unloading of cargo and reduce waiting times for ships in our various ports. As we forge ahead with the reform agenda, an urgent priority is to ensure a secure and reliable supply of water across the country. Many people in our cities, towns, and villages are experiencing more and more frequent water shortages as a result of failing water infrastructure. It is impossible to live without water, as we all know, and it is impossible for the economy to grow without water. We are therefore taking a series of decisive actions to resolve the water crisis, to enable our people to get water where they live, whether in townships or in the rural areas. We are investing heavily in expanding our water resources. Wherever one goes in our country, we often hear our citizens raising the issue of water continuously. So we are raising this issue to a much higher level, and like we did with electricity, I know and I am hopeful that we will resolve the water crisis that we have. loko u famba u ya atindhawini to tala u kuma ku ri vakhegulu va rila hi yona mhaka leyi ya mati. Va ku byela ku ri hi hava mati, hi lava ku ri hulumeni a hi tisela mati, hi ta swi endla swaleswo. Hi lava ku ri mi tiva kahle laha mi nga tshama kona ku ri mati a ta va kona, hi ta wa tisa mi wa kuma. To date, the Infrastructure Fund has secured 23 billion rand for 7 large water infrastructure projects. We have ended delays in major water infrastructure projects like Phase 2 of the Lesotho Highlands Water Project and the Umkomazi Dam. Work is underway to prepare for construction of the Ntabelanga Dam on the Umzimvubu River to supply additional water for domestic use as well as for irrigation in the Eastern Cape. Within the next year, we will complete the establishment of the National Water Resource Infrastructure Agency to unlock much greater investment in water projects. Through the Water Services Amendment Bill, we will introduce a licensing system for water service providers and remove licenses where providers do not meet the standards for quality drinking water. As part of our reform agenda, we will ensure that our focus on water is intensive and it speeds up. As we move ahead with our reform processes, we will continue to enhance our visa system to make it easier for skilled people to invest in our country and to grow tourism. This year, we will launch the electronic travel authorization system to enable a secure, fully digital visa application process. Now, this system will use artificial intelligence and automation to reduce the scope of corruption and enable rapid turnaround times for tourist visas. We have cleared over 90% of the backlog of more than 300,000 visa applications. Now, in many ways, these changes that are underway, these reforms that we're implementing, send a very strong message that South Africa is indeed open for business and tourism. As we open for tourism, the Chinese market, the Indian market, the market in the Middle East, the market in Europe and all over are waiting to come as tourists to our country. We want a nation in which prosperity and opportunity is shared by all. For many decades, our economy has been held back by the exclusion of the vast majority of South Africa's people. Black South Africans were deprived of land, of capital, of skills, and of opportunities. Our economy was starved of the potential that it has. And this is why we need to transform our economy and to make it more inclusive. That is why our focus is on empowering our people, on empowering women and persons with disabilities, because they were deliberately excluded from playing a role in the economy of their own country. And we will set up a transformation fund worth 20 billion rand a year over the next 5 years to fund black-owned and small business enterprises. We will fast-track the regulations of the Public Procurement Act to ensure that businesses that are owned by women, by young people, and persons with disabilities receive equitable opportunities in government contracts. And we have started and will continue to train women entrepreneurs to enable them to compete for government tenders. In November last year, we launched the National Skills Fund Disabilities Program. In its first phase, this transformative initiative will empower over 10,000 persons with disabilities through tailoring training for them and through ensuring that they get stipends and specialized tools. This part of the work we must undertake as business, as government and labor and civil society to enable people with disabilities to play an important role in the economy of our country. For far too long, they've been relegated to the back rooms of everything. Through these programs, we are not only righting a grave historical wrong, we are unleashing the potential of our economy for sustained growth. We want a nation where there is work for all, where every person can earn a decent living and realize their potential, where the rights of workers are protected and working conditions are improved, where women and men receive equal pay for work of equal value. We need to ensure that growth creates jobs for all, and especially for young people. The success of the presidential employment stimulus shows how public employment programs can create meaningful work that generates a wider benefit and contributes to sustainable employment. The employment stimulus that we introduced during the COVID period has created almost 2.2 million work and livelihood opportunities through innovative models that provide high-quality work to participants. The Social Employment Fund has created over 80,000 jobs this year. It has supported more than 12,000 participants to enter entrepreneurial activities. During the past year, young people secured 235,000 work opportunities through the National Pathway Management Network. And this is underpinned by the SA Youth Mobi platform. We now need to build on these innovative programs to create jobs for young people at ever greater scale. And to create jobs, we must leverage our unique strengths as well as our unrealized potential to build the industries of the future, as in green manufacturing, renewable energy, electrical vehicles, and the digital economy that is also driven by artificial intelligence. This year, we will finalize a modernized and comprehensive industrial policy that drives economic growth. We will achieve this ambition by focusing on the opportunities in localization, diversification, digitization, and decarbonization. We are working towards the full implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. which will tear down the barriers to trade on our continent. As the most industrialized economy on the African continent, we are positioning ourselves to be at the center of this new growing market. We are harnessing the sun and the wind to make our country a leader in renewable energy and green manufacturing. With an abundance of cheap green energy, we can produce products that are competitive anywhere in the world and create hundreds of thousands of new jobs in this process. We are making sustainable use of the rich abundance of the South African earth by supporting our farmers, improving our logistics network and rural supply chains, and opening new export markets for products that we grow or produce. We can significantly expand our agricultural sector. We want South Africa to be leading in the commercial production of products such as hemp and cannabis, a product that is so well known in the Eastern Cape and KZN, a product that our forebears have produced for generations and generations. We can add modern value to it and bring it to the shelves of the entire world. We are breathing new life into the mining industry, which remains one of our most important and valuable endowments. I often say that mining was the bedrock on which our economy was built, and it continues to be a sunrise industry. We are on track to implement a new, modern, and transparent mining rights system this year, which will unlock investment in exploration and production. We will put in place an enabling policy as well as a regulatory framework for critical minerals. By beneficiating these minerals here in South Africa, we can make use of the extraordinary wealth that lies beneath our soil for the benefit of our people. Even more valuable than our natural resources are the diversity, the energy, and the talent of the people of this country. The services sector is now the largest part of our economy, ranging from financial services to retail, hospitality, tourism, and the burgeoning in creative industry. The tourism sector is growing rapidly, with close on to 9 million tourists having visited our country last year. One of the attractive sites in our country, which we want to see growing more and more, is Robben Island. I visited Robben Island on the 8th of January. And I got to hear that in a year they are now going to receive 300,000. They want to grow it to 500,000 visitors in a year. And most of these visitors are South Africans. So we will grow tourism through our visa reforms, through increasing the number of flights to key destinations, and through the marketing of our country as the best country to visit in the world. And we have also seen strong growth in digital services, as well as business process outsourcing, as well as data centers. As the need for data grows in the world, our country is seen as a reservoir of having data centers. And this is continuing to create jobs for young people. To support this growth, we are investing in skills development for the industries of the future. The Jobs Boost Fund has pioneered a new model that links funding for skills in demand for the successful placement and particularly employment of young people. We are expanding our support for small and medium enterprises and for the informal economy, which sustains millions of jobs as well as livelihoods across our country. This includes streamlining funding for small businesses, unlocking venture capital for high-growth startups, and developing a regulatory environment that enables rather than restricts informal enterprises. To build an innovative economy, the Department of Science and Technology and Innovation will establish an innovation fund to provide venture capital to tech startups that emerge from our higher education institutions. We are calling on business to use the SA Youth Mobi platform, which currently has some 4.5 million young people registered for their hiring purposes. We're calling on business to support the Youth Employment Service to scale up workplace experience opportunities over the coming year. We want a nation where no one goes hungry. For 30 years, since the dawn of democracy, we have worked together to reduce poverty. Today, our country spends around 60% of our national budget on the social wage, on health, on education, on social protection, community development, and public employment programs. More than 28 million unemployed and vulnerable people in our country receive social assistance. More than 10.5 million learners go to public schools where they do not have to pay fees. Last year, over 900,000 students from poor working-class backgrounds and poor families and working-class backgrounds received funding to study at universities and colleges. Now, through these programs, we are alleviating the worst effects of poverty. We are providing the means through which South Africans can rise above poverty that has been passed down from one generation to the next. But we have much to do, and much more work needs to be done to end poverty in our country. We must do much more to ensure that women in particular no longer face the hopeless task to feed and clothe their children. While government invests heavily to support poor and unemployed people, these programs are fragmented and sometimes they are difficult to access. We are therefore building an integrated system of support for poor and unemployed people. We are strengthening existing programs from job search support to public employment and making sure that together they provide people with pathways out of poverty. Rather than expecting those in need to approach several government agencies separately, a citizen should be able to go to one place to receive all the support that they need. To protect the gains that we have made since 1994 in advancing children's rights, We will adopt the National Strategy to Accelerate Action for Children, which focuses on 10 key priorities, including poverty reduction, child protection, and addressing malnutrition. The Social Relief Distress Grant is an essential mechanism for alleviating extreme poverty. We will use this grant as a basis for the introduction of a more sustainable form of income support for unemployed people. Now, central to our efforts to end poverty and to develop our economy is to provide decent, quality education to every South African. We are immensely proud of the achievements of the matric class of 2024. It's a class which achieved the highest pass rate in our country's history. Now, 87% of learners who sat for their matric exams passed. For the first time in the history of our country, nearly half of these learners achieved bachelor pass. Nothing can diminish, frankly, nothing can diminish our pride in the hard work of these learners and the steady support of their teachers, parents, and broader community. And let us give them a big round of applause. We should all be proud of the class of 2024. But our immediate focus is to expand access to early childhood development for every child. Now this will be achieved through registering and formalizing existing ECD centers and ensuring that they have the facilities, the training and material that they need to provide quality learning. We will focus on ensuring that every child can read for meaning in the foundation phase to set them up for success in later years. To achieve this, we are implementing mother tongue-based bilingual education. We do this to improve literacy and numeracy, and rolling out lessons plans, reading books, and other interventions that have been proven to work. The Funza Rushaka bursary scheme will continue to prioritize students who want to pursue a teaching career in the foundation phase. Last year, we signed the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act, which was passed by this Parliament. Now, this act is pivotal for ensuring that education is accessible and is inclusive for all South Africans. This year, the Minister of Basic Education will introduce national policy, the norms and the standards and regulations to empower all partners in the basic education field to support the implementation of the Act. Now, to ensure that the economy has the skills that it needs, we are increasing the production of artisans through TVET colleges. Now, this is part of the shift we are undertaking towards education and skills development that combines formal learning with job training. Now, drawing on the models that have proven to be so successful in other countries, we're calling on the private sector to offer young people experiential learning opportunities while they undertake their studies. We are implementing phase 1 of the comprehensive student funding model for higher education to address the needs of the missing middle. This will support approximately 10,000 students in the first year. We want a nation in which there is quality health care for all. This year, we will proceed with the preparatory work for the establishment of the National Health Insurance. Now, this includes developing the first phase of a single electronic health record system, the preparatory work to establish the ministerial advisory committees on the health technologies and healthcare benefits, and an accreditation framework for health service providers. The NHI will reduce inequalities in healthcare by ensuring that everyone gets fair medical treatment. Now, the NHI will save many lives by providing a package of services that include, for example, even more especially, maternal and newborn care and services also for people living with HIV, those with TB, and those suffering from non-communicable diseases such as heart disease, cancer, and diabetes. Our most immediate priority is to strengthen the health system and improve the quality of care. A vital part of this is the modernization, the improvement, and the maintenance of existing health facilities and the construction of new hospitals and clinics. A number of hospitals are under construction or are undergoing revitalization. Now, these include the Limpopo Central Hospital, the Siloam District Hospital in Limpopo, the Tlhabeng Regional Hospital in the Free State, the Bambisana District Hospital, Zitulele District Hospital in the Eastern Cape, and the Buphelong Psychiatric Hospital in Northwest. Now, our projects, other projects are at various stages of design and development. Now, this includes the replacement of 3 existing new central hospitals, 5 new district hospitals, 5 community health centers, and a new psychiatric hospital. To improve patient experience, we are putting more emphasis on reducing waiting times, cleanliness, and staff attitudes in the public health facilities. We are encouraged by the great progress the country has made towards ending HIV and AIDS as a public health threat. By the end of March 2024, 96% of people living with HIV knew their status. 79% of these were on antiretroviral treatment, and 94% of these were on treatment with virally suppressed conditions. Now, to ensure that we reach the target of 95, 95, 95, which has been set by the World Health Organization, we will this year launch a massive campaign to look for an additional 1.1 million people who are not yet on treatment. We are concerned about the potential impact of the decision by the United States government to suspend some of its funding for HIV and TB programs in African countries for 90 days. Now, this funding that we get accounts for about 17% of our country's HIV spend. We have been able, over the years, to provide funding from our own resources, our own fiscus, for our HIV and TB programs. We are looking at various interventions to address the immediate needs and ensure the continuity of the essential services that we might lose if this funding does not come through. Now, to tackle inequality, we do need to undo apartheid special planning, which has scarred our country, our cities, and forced many people to live far away from areas of work and opportunity. We have delivered millions of housing opportunities since 1994, providing safety as well as dignity to poor households. Yet the practice of building housing developments on the periphery of urban centers has in many ways perpetuated inequality and urban sprawl. Going forward, we are going to build more housing in our city centers and closer to places of work and business. Now, we are redesigning our housing subsidies and directing more funding towards programs that enable people to buy or rent a home in an area of their choice. We will release more underutilized state properties for affordable housing development. And we are working with our provinces and metros, and I'm glad that a number of our premiers are here as well. We're working with them to reclaim buildings that have been hijacked in the city centers and repurpose them for public use. Now, we will provide 300,000 service stands to qualifying beneficiaries to enable housing development in well-planned, connected communities along key development corridors. We will clear the backlog of title deeds for subsidized housing, turning homes into household assets. And we will review land use, building, and other regulations to enable low-cost property development, including backyard housing. This represents a fundamental rethink of how the state delivers housing at scale while turning our cities into engines of growth and opportunity. In making our cities work for their residents, we will restore the remaining passenger rail corridors and stations to full service. More than 80% of passenger rail corridors have been returned to service. Now, PRASA has introduced over 200 modern, locally produced trains on its network to provide a low-cost option for public transport. Over the next 5 years, we will restore PRASA's signaling system so that we can put all our new trains to work and commuters can be assured that they can reach work safely, affordably, and on time. Now, we also want a nation in which everyone is safe. The police continue to work with other law enforcement agencies to dismantle organized crime syndicates and combat financial and violent crimes. The South African police has partnered with the metropolitan municipalities and continues to work with communities to fight crime in the priority provinces where crime is particularly high. Now, we are intensifying Operation Shanela. Shanela has been successful in arresting suspects, recovering firearms, and seizing stolen vehicles. And we must continue to tackle the scourge of gun violence that has continued to plague our society for decades. I have asked the Minister and the National Commissioner of Police to prioritize reducing gun-related crime and violence. Now, this includes preventing the diversion of firearms into the illicit market and recovering illegal firearms in circulation. We know from international evidence and our own experience that this is the most effective way to reduce overall violence. Analytics and smart policing solutions for modern law enforcement. We have seen the value of technology in fighting crime, and a number of countries that have opted to utilizing technology have made great progress. And by utilizing artificial intelligence in its fraud risk detection and verification work, SARS has prevented the leakage of over 95 billion rand in impermissible refunds. It has recovered 20 billion in revenue and dismantled an illicit tobacco and gold scheme. We continue to work across society to end the violence that is perpetrated against women. We have promulgated the National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Act, establishing a national structure to oversee a coordinated response to this crisis. We will ensure that the Council is fully functional and properly resourced. We continue to strengthen support to victims of gender-based violence. There are now 65 Tutuzela centers across the country. Out of the 52 districts in our country, 44 have gender-based violence shelters. All police stations in the country now have victim-friendly services, and another 16 sexual offences courts will be established in the next financial year. Now, we want a nation that deals with corruption. Last year, we established the Investigating Directorate Against Corruption as a permanent entity of the NPA dedicated to investigating and prosecuting high-level corruption. We will ensure that the Directorate is fully resourced and have access to information that it needs to prosecute state capture cases and hold those responsible to account. We are establishing a world-class digital forensic lab to support the investigation of complex corruption and financial crime. We are making steady progress in implementation of the recommendations of the State Capture Commission, including signing into law several legislative reforms. The Special Investigating Unit and Asset Forfeiture Unit report that over 10 billion rand has been recovered in state capture-related cases. Now, this year, the Department of Justice and Constitutional Department will report on the review of the Anti-Corruption Architecture National Anti-Corruption Advisory Council. This is expected to streamline legislation to eradicate duplication of mandates and foster greater cooperation between law enforcement agencies. And we will finalize the whistleblower protection framework and introduce the Whistleblower Protections Bill in Parliament during this financial year. And this year, we will strengthen South Africa's system of dealing with terror financing and further legislative systems improvements. To secure our removal from the International Financial Action Task Force grey list, we have made significant progress in addressing the weaknesses that were identified in our law enforcement system, with 16 out of 22 action items fully addressed. We want a nation that is at peace with the world. We want to continue through our international relations to advance the well-being of the people of South Africa as we seek to advance the well-being of humanity. Now, we will work to strengthen our trade relations around the world and to leverage our strong and diverse global alliances to make our economy more resilient. The key pillars of our foreign policy remain the promotion of human rights, peace and friendship, and the strengthening of fair trade and investment ties with other countries. Now, these are the principles that guide our presidency of the G20 this year.
It's not that much to say.
We have chosen the theme of solidarity, equality, and sustainable development to underscore the need for cooperation and partnership amongst the countries of the world. For the first time in its history, the G20 is being hosted on the African continent. And this is particularly important following the admission of the African Union as a member of the G20. It is a great opportunity for us to place the needs of our continent and the rest of the global South more firmly on the international development agenda. Our G20 presidency is a valuable opportunity for South Africa to advance efforts towards greater global economic growth and sustainable development. Africa remains at the center of our foreign policy. We continue to work to strengthen the African Union, to support the achievement of peace, development, and economic integration on our continent. We know that our future prosperity is intricately linked and bound to the prosperity of the African continent. For South Africa to thrive, we must ensure that Africa does indeed thrive as well. And we must silence the guns on our continent. Now, since the advent of democracy, we've been instrumental in restoring stability in countries such as Côte d'Ivoire, Burundi, South Sudan, Lesotho. More recently, we've been part of the SADC peacekeeping mission in Mozambique that has brought relative calm and stability to the Cabo Delgado province. The presence of South African peacekeepers in the eastern DRC is testament to our continued commitment to peaceful resolution of one of the world's most intractable conflicts that has gone on for years and that has cost millions of lives and displaced many people. Now, we call on all parties to embrace the current diplomatic efforts to find a peaceful resolution, including honoring the Luanda process. We will attend the joint summit between SADC and the East African Community scheduled to take place in Tanzania this weekend, where we will reiterate our call for a ceasefire and a resumption of talks to find a just and enduring solution, and we will make sure that our boys, our soldiers do come back home. We have always believed that the freedom that we won and the international solidarity from which we benefited does impose a duty on us to support the struggles of those who continue to experience colonialism and oppression. South Africa continues to stand in solidarity with the people of Palestine, who have endured decades of illegal occupation and are now experiencing indescribable suffering. And South Africa has acted in accordance with its obligations under the Genocide Convention by instituting proceedings against Israel in the International Court of Justice. We are fully committed to the articles of the United Nations, including the principles that all members should settle their international disputes by peaceful means. We support the principle of respect of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of all states and peoples. We continue to participate in the different peace processes seeking to bring about a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. South African delegations have been instrumental in developing a framework for negotiations towards a just peace in Ukraine based on the UN Charter and international law. Our country continues to advance its agenda of cooperation and multilateralism through its membership of the United Nations, the African Union, the Non-Aligned Movement, BRICS, and a number of other international bodies. As humanity confronts unprecedented challenges, we are determined that a reformed and representative United Nations must be at the center of global affairs, and we will continue to push for progress on the reform of the UN Security Council to be a more inclusive, more effective body that is able to ensure peace and security. And we will work to ensure that the needs of the people of the world are advanced. And the work that we do and what we stand for does need to be explained to many key players, especially to our trading partners and the many countries and leaders that we interact with on the global stage, and with a view of explaining the positions that we have taken, and in particular, the objectives that we wish to achieve during our presidency of the G20, I have decided to send a delegation of government and other leaders to various capitals on our continent across the world. This delegation will interact with various key players on a variety of matters that affect South Africa's interests. I will direct that they leave as soon as possible to interact with various key players on our continent and in the world, so that our presidency of the G20 objectives can be well explained. All these things that we speak of are possible. As South Africans, we know the power of cooperation, of what is possible when people of different backgrounds, different races, cultures, languages, and ethnic groups and religions come together behind a shared objective. The formation of the Government of National Unity provides us with an opportunity to show once again that we can achieve what we can achieve by working together. And I call on all South Africans, united in our diversity, to come together in the national dialogue that we are going to have to define a vision for our country for the next 30 years. The national dialogue must be a place where everyone has a voice. It must be a place to find solutions that make a real difference in people's lives. The dialogue must reaffirm that each and every one of us has a role to play in building the nation that we want. We must therefore be builders and not people who seek to destroy the future of South Africans. While we may differ on many issues, we agree on one thing, that we need to build a better South Africa and improve the well-being of our people, and that we should do so not by sitting on the sidelines and shouting. We should be in the scrum working to develop the lives of our people. And so, as we enter the new era in the world and in our own country, let us speak of empathy, of compassion that we have for one another. Let us speak of the pride that we have of our country and all that we have achieved. Let us speak of the determination that won us freedom and drives us forward now to a better future. With this determination, we will work together to make this an era of growth, of progress and transformation. We will work together to build the nation that we want, and we will only be able to do it by working together and not by shouting together. And we will only be able to do it by ensuring that we as the leaders ensure that those who will come after us, our children and our great children, inherit a country that we have helped to build, not to destroy. Thank you very much.
The House has not yet adjourned.
I thank the Honorable, the President. Order, honorable members. After I have adjourned the joint sitting, members should rise and remain at their places until the procession has left the chamber. The guests in the gallery should remain seated until the judiciary has left, and the ushers will indicate when the doors are open. The procession led by the usher of the Black Rod and the acting Sergeant-at-Arms will leave the chamber in the following order: the Speaker of the National Assembly, the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, the President, the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, the Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, the Deputy President, the Secretary to Parliament. That concludes the business for the day, and the joint sitting is adjourned. Okay. Honorable members, just one announcement. As you would recall that earlier on the changes were made with regards to the venue. Members are requested to join their spouse at the ICC. Dinner will be served and the beverages. Thank you very much.